Hey guys, welcome to the video. I hope you are ready to learn something about seam finishes because today we are moving on to the next episode in our seam finishes mini-series. So last week we talked about French seams, so I will link that video somewhere up there in case you want to check that out. But today we're talking about flat fell seams, which are a really good finish for garments that are going to get a lot of hard wear. So they're really common in jeans and dress shirts. So if you look in your closet and you have any jeans or button-up shirts, you'll probably have some flat fell seams in there to look at. So let's get into the tutorial. Okay, so I have 2 squares of fabric cut out, and I'm gonna sew them together with a flat fell seam. So here I'm just showing you, it's kind of hard to see in the video, but I'm showing you which side is the right and wrong side of the fabric. So I'm going to place the 2 pieces of fabric together, lining up the edges with wrong sides together. So this is opposite of what you would normally do in a regular seam. So you're putting basically the inside of the fabric, or the side that's not as pretty, together, and then pinning along the edge that you want to sew. Alright, so I've got my fabric here all pinned wrong sides together, and I'm going to sew along the side that I pinned, and I'm sewing with my entire seam allowance. So for this I was sewing 1/2 inch from the raw edges, and then we'll take this to the iron. Okay, so I've got my pieces of fabric here sewn wrong sides together, and I'm going to lay them down on the ironing board and iron the seam allowances open. And I like to iron from both sides just to make sure that I get it really nice and flat. And once I get it ironed open like that, then I'm going to turn it over so the seam allowances are on top, and I'm going to iron it to one side. So if you're making a garment, usually you would iron this towards the back of your garment. And then I will grab my scissors and I'm going to trim the seam allowance that's underneath, so the one on the bottom, and I'm going to trim it down to about 1/4 inch, so 1/2 of my seam allowance. And then once I get that trimmed, then I'm going to wrap the upper seam allowance over the one that's underneath and iron that down. So it's basically encasing the shorter seam allowance in the larger one. And then once we get that all ironed nicely, if your fabric doesn't iron very well, you can pin this or you can roll it under while you're at the sewing machine. But this fabric ironed really nicely, so I'm just going to iron it and then just take it to the sewing machine without pinning it because the folds stayed pretty well without any pins. So now I'm going to take it to the sewing machine and just sew right along that edge to hold everything in place. Alright, so I'm back at the sewing machine, and now I'm going to sew right along that folded edge that we just ironed, and I'm just going to sew as close as I can to the edge there to hold everything down. Try to sew as straight as possible since it'll be visible on the outside. And then you're done. So isn't that just so pretty? I think it's such a great finish, especially for button-up shirts, and I like to use it for jeans too. But yeah, that's all there is to it. Not too hard, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you in the next one.